I, 28 male, am a structural engineer, a guy who naturally values predictability, solid foundations, and things making logical sense. My now ex-girlfriend and I had been dating for just over 14 months, and for a while, things seemed decent. But over the last few months, the cracks in our foundation had really started showing. Small things at first. Entitled demands. Expectations that my wallet was an extension of her own purse. I always tried to brush it off, giving her the benefit of the doubt and hoping it was just stress from her dead-end administrative job. This particular dinner was supposed to be a reset for us. We had been arguing a lot, and I figured a nice evening out might help us talk things through. My treat, of course, as it always was. We went to a dimly lit, overpriced downtown seafood restaurant that she had been begging to try. She wore a dark red dress, the kind that immediately drew eyes from across the room. I noticed the attention she was getting, but what I noticed even more was that she wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were constantly darting toward the service station, almost like she was looking for someone. Eventually, our waiter approached the table. He was tall, heavily tattooed, and carried that manufactured, arrogant swagger of someone who peaked in high school but still expects the world to applaud him every time he walks into a room. He didn't introduce himself or give us the standard greeting. He just leaned over our table, completely invading our personal space, and looked directly at her. "What are we drinking tonight?" he asked, his voice entirely too familiar and way too casual for a high-end restaurant. My girlfriend smiled. It wasn't her polite, customer service smile. It was a slow, deliberate smirk. "I'll have the reserve Cabernet, the really expensive one. And I want the 2-pound stuffed lobster for my main." She didn't even glance at a menu. She didn't ask me what I was getting, or if that was okay. A 2-pound stuffed lobster at this specific place was a flat $200. The wine she asked for was $40 a glass. I looked at the waiter and ordered a standard sirloin and a glass of water. The waiter didn't even bother to write my order down. He just kept his eyes completely locked on her. Good choice. A woman who knows exactly what she wants. I like that. "I always get what I want," she replied, leaning forward and resting her elbows on the table to emphasize her cleavage. I was sitting right there. I cleared my throat, trying to break whatever weird trance this was. "Excuse me, can we get some bread for the table?" The waiter finally broke eye contact with her, looking at me with absolute disdain, like I had just insulted him. "Sure, bread." He turned back to my girlfriend, his voice dropping an octave. "I'll make sure the chef picks the absolute best lobster in the tank just for you." He walked away, and I just sat there staring at her. She immediately picked up her phone and started typing frantically, completely ignoring my existence. "Are you serious right now?" I asked, keeping my voice low but firm. She didn't look up from her screen. "What?" "You're aggressively flirting with the staff right in front of my face, right after ordering a $200 meal on my dime." She rolled her eyes and finally set the phone face down on the table. "Oh, please don't be so insecure. It's just harmless banter. It gets us better service. Besides, if you treated me right, I wouldn't have to look for compliments elsewhere." The sheer audacity of that statement hung heavily in the air. I had paid her rent the previous month when she came up short. I had literally bought the red dress she was currently wearing. A few minutes later, the waiter returned, pouring her expensive wine with agonizing slowness. He leaned in incredibly close to her ear. "Just for you." She giggled. She actually sat there and giggled like a schoolgirl. She reached out, lightly tracing the rim of her wine glass, locking eyes with him again. And then she delivered the line. She said it loudly and clearly, making sure the neighboring tables could hear her. "I bet you're better than my boyfriend." The waiter smirked, glancing down at me like I was a piece of trash on the sidewalk. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene or bang my fists on the table. The math in my head simply clicked into place. The relationship was totally bankrupt. There was absolutely zero return on this investment, and I was done being the punchline to a joke I didn't even want to be a part of. I looked at her. I looked at him. "Probably," I said. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out 3 crisp $20 bills, and set them precisely in the center of the table. $60. That was exactly enough to cover my sirloin, my water, and a customary 20% tip for my portion of the meal. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and walked out of the restaurant without saying another word. The walk to my car was dead quiet. The cold night air actually felt incredibly refreshing against my face. I started the engine, merged onto the highway, and just drove. Exactly 12 minutes later, my phone started vibrating furiously in the center console. It was her. I let it ring. It stopped, then immediately started buzzing again. Then came the rapid-fire texts. "Where did you go? Are you in the bathroom? Get back here right now. The bill is here. I don't have my wallet. Come back, you coward." I drove in complete silence. I pulled into my driveway, parked, and walked into my house. This was my house. The one I bought entirely on my own 2 years before I even met her. She had been practically living here for the past couple of months, slowly filling my space with her clutter, but I am a cautious guy. I had strictly kept her off any lease agreements, utility bills, or official documents. To make sure tenancy laws didn't kick in, I always made sure she went back to her mother's house at least 3 nights a week. Her permanent mailing address remained at her mom's. That little precaution was about to pay off immensely. I walked into my home office to decompress. Her laptop was sitting open on my desk, plugged into my expensive ultra-wide monitor setup. She had been using it to work from home earlier in the day. The screen was awake, and the iMessage application was open and highly active. Now, I don't make a habit of snooping through people's things, but a notification popped up in the top right corner of the huge monitor, and the text was too large to ignore. "Your loser BF actually left? What the heck? Manager is super pissed." I froze. I sat down in my desk chair and scrolled up slightly. The contact was saved in her phone as Ryan Jim. The message history went back about 3 months. There were explicit messages and photos I really wish I hadn't seen. But the messages from earlier this afternoon were the ones that grabbed my absolute, undivided attention. She had texted him, "I'm bringing him to your section tonight around 7. Ryan replied, "Perfect. Order the big lobster. Rack up the bill. I'll flirt with you. Make him look like a total wimp. He'll pay just to get you out of there." She responded, "I know. Then, I'm ending things with him this weekend anyway. Free $200 meal before I dump the dead weight. See you later, babe." It wasn't just simple entitlement or a spur-of-the-moment lack of respect. It was a calculated, predatory setup. They wanted to humiliate me, use my hard-earned money for a lavish date right in front of my face, and then discard me. But my walking out hadn't just embarrassed her. It had completely derailed their entire scam. Ryan couldn't just comp a $200 lobster without getting fired on the spot by his manager. He was stuck, and she was stuck with the bill. I calmly walked to the hall closet, grabbed 3 heavy-duty black trash bags, and walked straight into the master bedroom. I packed everything she owned. Her clothes, her expensive makeup, her shoes. I swept the bathroom counter, completely clear. I unplugged her hair tools. I took the heavy bags and lined them up neatly on the front porch. I went back inside, locked the deadbolt, and sat down on the living room couch to wait. My phone buzzed again. It was a voicemail from her mother. I played it on speaker. "How dare you leave my daughter stranded at a restaurant?" She had to call me in tears to wire her money, just so she wouldn't get arrested for theft. She only had enough for the food and couldn't even leave a tip. "She's taking an Uber home right now, and you better have a really good apology ready, you piece of garbage." I checked the time. The Uber would probably be here in about 10 minutes. I walked over to the bookshelf, adjusted the angle of the hidden security camera I used to monitor my dog while I was at work, making sure it had a clear view of the living room and the front door. Then I waited. The pounding on the front door a few minutes later absolutely shook the frame. "Open the freaking door," she screamed from the porch. I walked over, keeping the deadbolt firmly locked. I spoke clearly through the solid wood. "Your bags are on the porch. We are entirely done. Do not come back here." "Are you insane?" she shrieked, her voice echoing in the quiet neighborhood. "Open this door. I live here. You can't just kick me out. I have squatter's rights. I'll call the police and have you arrested for an illegal eviction." She had clearly done some terrible internet legal research, but she was dead wrong. Because she didn't pay a dime in rent, wasn't on any lease, didn't receive official mail here, and legally maintained her permanent residence at her mother's house by staying there several nights a week, she was legally considered a guest in my state. A guest whose welcome had just officially expired. "Call them," I said calmly. There was a moment of silence, followed by the terrifying sound of glass shattering. She had picked up a heavy decorative brick from my garden bed and smashed the small window panel right next to the front door. She reached her arm through the jagged glass, unlocked the deadbolt from the inside, and stormed into the house. She looked completely unhinged. Her expensive red dress was wrinkled, her makeup was smeared from crying, and her eyes were wide with pure, unadulterated rage. "You embarrassed me," she screamed, aggressively stepping into the living room. "You made me call my mother to pay for my own dinner." Ryan got written up by his manager because I couldn't afford the tip. "Ryan," I said flatly, not backing away. "Your gym friend." She froze for a fraction of a second. The sudden realization that I knew exactly what was going on hit her hard, but her massive entitlement immediately overrode any sense of shame or guilt she should have felt. "Yeah, Ryan," she yelled, closing the distance between us. "He's twice the man you are. At least he knows how to actually treat a woman." "By making her mother pay for her lobster?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. That single sentence pushed her right over the edge. She looked around frantically, stormed over to my home office area, grabbed my $800 curved ultra-wide monitor right off the desk, lifted it above her head, and slammed it down onto the hardwood floor. The screen spiderwebbed into 1,000 pieces with a sickening crunch. "How's that for expensive, you cheap jerk?" she spat at me. Then she pulled out her phone. Her tone instantly shifted from a raging maniac to a trembling, terrified victim. She dialed 911. "Help! Please help me," she cried into the phone, producing actual, very convincing tears. "My boyfriend went crazy. He threw all my things outside, he smashed his own computer in a rage, and now he's threatening to hurt me. Please hurry, I'm so scared." She hung up the phone, looked at me, and smiled a cold, victorious smile. "You're going to jail tonight. And I'm getting a restraining order tomorrow, which means I get to stay in this house while you sit in a concrete cell." I didn't say a single word. I didn't react. I just slowly raised my hand and pointed to the bookshelf, to the tiny, blinking red light of the dog camera. "It records in 1080p. And it records audio, too," I said. All the color instantly drained from her face. 10 minutes later, flashing blue and red lights illuminated my living room walls. 2 police officers walked through the front door, looking tense. She immediately ran over to them, crying hysterically, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He's crazy. He broke the window. He smashed the monitor to intimidate me. He said he was going to kill me." The older officer held up a hand to stop her. "Ma'am, please step back." "Sir, what exactly is going on here?" I didn't argue. I just pulled out my iPad, opened the security application, and exported the last 15 minutes of high-definition footage. I handed the tablet to the officer. "I broke up with her at a restaurant tonight," I explained calmly. "She came here, forced entry into my home by breaking that window, purposely destroyed my expensive property, and then filed a false police report right in front of me. It is all clearly documented on that video." The officer watched the footage, silently. He watched her smash the glass with a brick. He watched her aggressively break the monitor. He watched her fake the entire 911 call. He handed the iPad back to me, unclipped the handcuffs from his belt, and turned to her. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," he ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. "What?" "No." "He's lying. You can't do this," she panicked, backing away toward the wall. "Ma'am, I just watched high-definition video of you committing a property crime and intentionally misusing the 911 emergency system. Hands behind your back. Right now." She actually tried to fight them. It took both officers to secure her arms and get her into the cuffs. As they walked her out the front door and toward the cruiser, her screaming echoed down the otherwise completely quiet suburban street. I just stood on my porch and watched the police car drive away into the night. The next 3 weeks were an absolute masterclass in holding the line and refusing to cave. Her mother called me constantly from different numbers, alternating between wild threats and desperate begging. She lost her administrative job because she was sitting in a jail cell for 2 days. She has a permanent criminal record now. Just drop the charges, pay for your own monitor, and we'll call it even. I blocked every single number she used. What they didn't understand is that in the United States, a victim can't just casually drop charges once the state decides to pick up a criminal case. The prosecutor had crystal clear video evidence of a crime. They formally charged her with misdemeanor vandalism, since the monitor and the window repair totaled just under $1,200, and filing a false police report. But I wasn't finished. The criminal justice system handles the state's grievance against her actions. I wanted my actual money back for the things she broke. I filed a lawsuit in small claims court for the exact cost of the monitor replacement, the broken window repair invoice, and the court filing fees. While I was waiting for our court date, I paid a little daytime visit to that upscale seafood restaurant. I asked the hostess to speak to the general manager. I sat down with him in his back office and quietly showed him the printed screenshots of the iMessage conversation between my ex and his employee. The manager's face literally turned purple as he read the text messages. Ryan wasn't just planning to humiliate a paying customer. He was actively conspiring to cost the restaurant money, alienate guests, and give away expensive freebies to his side pieces. Ryan was fired and escorted off the premises before I even made it back to my car in the parking lot. Our day in small claims court a few weeks later was very brief. She showed up looking completely exhausted and defeated. Without her job, she couldn't afford her own apartment anymore, and she definitely couldn't afford any legal counsel. Not that lawyers are even allowed to represent you in small claims court in our state anyway. The judge asked for my evidence. I calmly presented the official receipts for the monitor and the window repair, alongside a flash drive containing the security footage of the incident. The judge looked over the documents and asked her if she had any valid legal defense for her actions. "He provoked me," she muttered, staring down at the scuffed courtroom floor. "He humiliated me in public by leaving." The judge peered over his glasses at her, completely unamused. Humiliation is not a valid legal defense for the intentional destruction of someone else's property, ma'am. Judgment is ruled for the plaintiff in the exact amount of $1,145. You have 30 days to set up an approved payment plan with the court clerk downstairs. We walked out of the courtroom shortly after. She stood by the elevator bank, looking like a shell of the entitled person she was a month ago. She had no job. She had a fresh criminal record. She had a mountain of debt on her credit cards from all the lavish lifestyle choices she couldn't actually afford to maintain. And Ryan? He dumped her the exact second he lost his lucrative serving job, loudly blaming her for ruining his life. She looked up at me, her eyes brimming with genuine tears this time. "Are you happy now? You literally ruined my entire life over a stupid little joke at a restaurant." "It wasn't a joke," I replied, hitting the down button for the elevator. "And I didn't ruin your life at all. You ordered the lobster. I just finally let you pay the bill." I stepped into the elevator as it arrived, and the doors slid closed, leaving her standing there entirely alone in the empty courthouse hallway. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. But sometimes you really do have to pack it up in heavy black bags and leave it on the front porch for the rest of the world to see. If you want more stories about entitled people getting exactly what they ordered from life, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button before the waiter brings the check.